Shabbat Shalom, everyone. It is so good to be with you all this morning, my colleagues here in the Ghent Chapel, and with those of you who are watching online. It is, of course, Shabbat. It is Shabbat Shuvah. Yom Kippur, Kol Nidre begins tomorrow night. So I wanted to talk about an approach to how to live in this world and an approach to how to think about our prayer life as well in light of this very momentous season. So just to frame the thought, you know the Kaddish that Shmuel Agnon wrote for the Holocaust, and he interpolates the words of Mourner's Kaddish with the names of the death camps, Yitkadal, Auschwitz, etc., in ways that make those two realities play off each other. As I have been praying Unetaneh Tokef throughout the Rosh Hashanah season, I did kind of my own kind of interpolation. Who by fire, Maui. Who by water, Libya. Who an untimely end, the earthquakes in Morocco and Turkey. Who an untimely end, Ukraine. Who shall be molested, Ukraine. And then I was thinking a lot about our own beloved country. I had listened to Barbara Kingsolver's Demon Copperhead over the summer, and it's about the dire poverty in so much of America, in the heartland, in Appalachia, and the systemic poverty that exists and that eventuates in all kinds of troubling symptoms like deep division, poisoned politics, inability to form a sense of real connection in the different parts of our country. There's flyover country and the effete elite coasts, etc. All that pathology, all of which is very deep and systemic. And the question that I have as I was thinking about America and Unetaneh Tokef that has Maui and Morocco and Libya, etc. in it is, what is our helpful response to that? Like, what do we do in response to that reality? And the text that I wanted to bring was If Not Higher by I.L. Peretz, which Stephen Greenblatt is going to be teaching on Monday at 4:30. He, of course, grew up at Temple Emanuel, is the preeminent Shakespeare scholar in the world today, and is a university professor at Harvard. And he's going to be talking to us about Tikkun Olam. And one of the texts that he's going to teach is this Peretz Story. So let's thank God for the gift of learning Torah together, and then we'll see whether Peretz furnishes us a response to this world that is commensurate to the problems of this world. Baruch
atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah, v'ערב נא אדוני אלוהינו את דברי תורתך בפינו ובפי עמך בית ישראל, ונהיה אנחנו וצאצאינו וצאצאי עמך בית ישראל, כולנו יודעי שמך ולומדי תורתך לשמה. ברוך אתה אדוני מלמד תורה לעמו ישראל, ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר בחר בנו מכל העמים ונתן לנו את תורתו. Baruch atah Adonai Unetaneh Torah.
So, colleagues, for somebody who hasn't yet read the Peretz Story, if not higher, who wants to just kind of summarize the story? It's a very brief story, but somebody summarize for us what happens in the story.
Well, I'll just say, read the story. It's amazing. It's short, and the way in which he tells it is so poignant and powerful that even though I've heard this story a million times, just reading it here in this text brought tears to my eyes. It is, of course, about a rabbi who goes out and he disappears somewhere into the night, right at the moment when he is supposed to be, praying and serving and officiating. And there is this little conflict between those who have kind of a Hasidic soul and those who have what they call a Litvak soul. The skeptic says, like, where does the Rebbe disappear to? I want to know, I want to understand. And he follows him. And that probably should be enough telling for now, otherwise we're going to give away the end of the story.
Yeah, but just hold for a second. What time of year is it? What time of year is this story taking place?
Slichot.
At the high holidays.
Slichot. So it's presumably something like between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. It's basically Elul, or it could also be in between, the first 10 days of Tishrei, right? And the story talks about penitential prayers We know Slichot as this beautiful slot from 8 to 9 on the first Saturday night. We watch Barbie. We have some conversations. We listen to beautiful music. But talk about Slichot or penitential prayers in a different kind of Jewish context. How else could that look?
Well, the Orthodox, they do slichot before sunrise every day, starting in the month of Elul. And that's hours and hours of penitential soul searching.
With no Barbie.
With no Barbie.
No, Barbie, but it's a very joyful, it's an interesting paradox because you have very joyful, beautiful music sung with a lot of energy, but all about like, I've done so many wrong things this year, please God forgive me.
Right. And the energy of slichot, of penitential prayers in this Orthodox setting, is it's prayers done in shul, early in the morning, okay? And so what prompts this whole plot is the shul's there, beating away, and the Rebbe is not there.
I love the story where the Litva goes and hides underneath the bed to see when the rabbi comes, and then he decides to follow him. It's fascinating about where the Litvak is suspicious about where the rabbi is going, thinking badly about him.
Yeah,
but
and
the story ends in a completely different way, which is so beautiful.
Yeah, so Elias, take the story from that point on. So the Litvak is suspicious. They're
Hope
all
you've had
there.
time to read in between.
Yes, that people are, the rest of the community is doing slichot, they're doing the penitential prayers. The Rebbe's not. Most of the kahal, at least it supports him, says, oh, he's doing something good. This Litvak is...
He's going to heaven.
He's going to heaven. This Litvak is very suspicious. Okay, and then take the story from there.
Yeah, he goes in kind of like a little forest, and he starts chopping wood. And
the Rebbe does.
The Rebbe does
and
that.
And the Litvak sees him do this.
Can you imagine doing that, Wes?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Let's go to, I don't know, somewhere here in the Newton area. And then he brings the Litvak follows the rabbi. The rabbi goes to a house where an elderly woman is there, woman, and she says that she doesn't have any money, and then he knocks at the door, wants to sell the wood to her. She refuses because she doesn't have any money, but then she says that, how I'm supposed to pay you, and then he says, trust me, you don't need to pay me now, you can pay me later. So he's able to trust her, as he says, and it's a funny thing how he, Peretz changes a little bit, saying that you're not, where's your faith?
Right.
Where's your faith? And you don't have faith. And it's a beautiful story. He's really doing a mitzvah. He's keeping prayer in order to do a good action.
But also he's pretending to be a Russian, which I find so fascinating. He says to her, like, what? I can trust you for 6 cents, but you can't trust your God, that your God is going to provide you this 6 cents. And he's pretending as if he were a person that would be a source of danger to her, as if he would be a person that should ask for tshuva from her, a person who would be abusing her generally, and he is creating this healing and at the same time also doing this direct act of service instead of, and it's not even instead of, because actually you hear the Litvak hears him
Right. He doesn't even say
reciting
he's
his
the rabbi.
psalms,
Right.
penitential
Right.
psalms
So
while
praying
he's doing
while he's doing
Right,
it. It's
so we're
not,
gonna-
Yeah, it's not either or. He's praying
It's an
while
and.
he does the action.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. I think that's such a crucial scene. But first, can we just talk about the theme of disguise? Why does the rabbi disguise himself? Why doesn't he knock on the door and present his card and say, I'm the rabbi of prison?
I mean, this reading, and I hadn't seen this before, but for me, this reading felt like he was doing the penitential psalms for the world. Like he was creating a way for community to see Russians not as oppressed, because right? Like there's
Right.
no, but he
also-
deliberately goes in as like, I'm a Russian.
Yeah,
So
also
he's-
this idea that we always talk about, that the best way, the highest level of doing tzedakah is the one that is unknown, the anonymous way. So he's probably trying to relieve that.
Right. So he's trying to heal her body by giving her warmth and perhaps heal her soul by changing her perceptions that not all Russians are Cossacks who want to kill you. here's a nice Russian who wants to, make you warm in a cold winter night.
Or, I mean, that's such a lovely interpretation, or it's just much simpler than that. That's his disguise, and that's what it means to be truly anonymous in
But
this
Anyway,
world.
we were all bad Russians in Fiddler on the Roof. Remember that?
We would not have been well disguised, just to be clear.
But I have a question, though. I mean, why? It's obvious from the story that there's a question, at least in some parts of the community, where's the rabbi, where's the rabbi? It's a deep enough level of skepticism that the Litvak is disbelieving and follows him around. Why doesn't the rabbi just say, hey, guys, I am going around providing wood, and kindling wood, and heating the homes of elderly widows who are otherwise going to freeze to death? Why not just speak the truth? What about transparency?
I think he speaks about how humble he is, that he doesn't want to brag about it. Because once you start saying it, you create, unfortunately, congregants who are suspicious. Oh, he only does it so we can say, oh, he's a great guy. Could be one interpretation.
Well, also, the story about the rabbi is he's going to heaven, right? He's on such a high spiritual plane, and perhaps part of the, you would expect that if this is the right thing to do, that you would be telling your congregants, hey guys, everybody, follow me, do this, do what I do, come out and do acts of service for your slichot. But there is something in his character that he has evolved a spirituality that enables him to do that.
So let's talk about the both paragraph. I mean, it's on the last paragraph of the story. Michelle, would you kindly read that? This is where he is offering up the penitential prayers and also doing the service at the same time.
As the rabbi puts the wood into the oven, he recited in a groan the first portion of the penitential prayers. As he kindled the fire and the wood burned brightly, he recited a bit more joyously the second portion of the penitential prayers. When the fire was set, he recited the third portion and shut the stove.
And what's the meaning you make of that paragraph, Michelle?
I think it's prayer in action. It is the embodiment of the prayers that he is saying, and it is the expression of what the prayers are inviting him to do in this world. And I think that finding expression so beautifully through that groan. When you started out this morning, you shared all the things that make us groan. And we are so heavily laden with all of the pain of the world. But when you find action, when you find the ability to help in some small corner, that does give us the opportunity to start to feel and find joy, purpose, and meaning in our prayers.
I believe my interpretation here is that not only he is talking about general things that happen in the world that are painful, but perhaps taking a look at his own actions and being sad or not really 100% comfortable what he has done during the year.
Yeah,
okay.
I'm sorry. I think also that there's really a double meaning here in the sense that he could have been bringing this woman food. Why fire? And as the fire, it's hard to kindle the fire. It takes a lot of work. And I think that that's a message that's related to the penitential period. We start off slowly, and then we finally begin to catch, and then we really catch on. And I think that for him, it's a personal moment where this is the way that he prays by kindling a fire, and it's a metaphor for kindling the fire not only for himself and for this elderly ill woman, but also for the entire kahal.
Great job, Lord Nesson.
That's so beautiful.
I also was on the fire. I think that there's also something that harkens back. There's a tension in the story between the Litvak, who does everything by the book, exactly right, and who can recite, while he's overnight underneath the rabbi's bed, which is this awkward moment, but whatever, he doesn't have an awkward moment because he's reciting tractates of Talmud by memory. But this person who does it all right, this rabbi, to me that was so evocative also of sacrifices in the temple, that he was the groan and the sounds and the wood and the spark and the light. All of that would have been a way that earlier our ancestors would have asked for forgiveness by taking an animal and sacrificing it on an altar and burning it up. And so he has this way of accessing even earlier primordial kind of ways of getting to God. But it's not about showing off what he can do. He's just in his spiritual practice. He's just living this relationship with God and relationship with the people around him.
It's embodied prayer.
Embodied prayer. By the way, Elias, I remember when you were installed as the cantor, Rabbi Chill, may he rest in peace, did a blessing for you. And the text that he used was Va'ani Tefilati, that we say when we take the Torah out of the ark. And he said, may this be the prayer, not just that you sing it, Va'ani Tefilati, that you become the prayer that you sing, that you embody the prayer that you sing. And that, I think, is what's going on here. So with all that beauty and loveliness, I want to just flip the script. How would you critique the Rebbe in terms of what's not done here, what's not covered here, what's not assuaged here, what's not responded to here, what's not changed here?
His kahal.
His kahal.
But wait, is it on the Rebbe for that? Like, I just
Well,
want to...
I'm just asking the question. I know. I'm not.
Rebbe. I love the Rebbe.
I'm not anti.
I don't want to say a word because then they will say cantors always criticize rabbis.
But okay, Dan, you say the kahal. Okay.
So what I mean by that is that they're kind of more leaning towards the mode of the litvak. We are in shul and we are saying the right words at the right time, but does that mean we're actually motivated to do anything more for teshuvah, something, to be helpful for people?
Yeah. So it raises the question: is prayer without action? Is prayer without service? Is that enough? How helpful is that? Since the Rebbe himself is actually lighting fires for cold people,
right. Cold
old people. So it leaves you with a question about the kahal. But I guess here's what I'm getting at. And I don't want to be unduly critical. But one, at least theoretically, could critique this rabbi as engaged solely in important symptom relief. In other words, the Rebbe helps one cold, bereft person on one morning, but deals with this poor person, but not with poverty. Deals with this cold person, but not with a fuel shortage in general. Deals with this moment of suffering, but not with suffering in general. Symptom relief, which, by the way, is a lot more than I ever do. I want to say that. But I guess what I'm saying is there are symptoms, and then there are root causes. And it feels like, for example, you remember at Temple Emanuel, we've always historically had two arms of our social justice movement. We've had direct service, and then Hillel's call to action. Direct service was feed the poor. Beautiful, who could argue with it? That's what this rabbi does. But then there's Hillel's call to action, which is, what about systemic work to eliminate poverty? And I guess what I'm asking is, it doesn't seem like there's any systemic work. And indeed, once this fire, and what's the long-lastingness of this rabbi's conduct? Of course, he warms her heart and soul, and that's beautiful, and he's warmed every reader ever since. But once the fire goes out, what happens next? And what about all the women and all the cold people that he couldn't get to? So could you just talk about symptom relief without systemic change?
So what I love about that question is that you answered it yourself by the texts that you provided here for us to read when you brought the text from Devarim about there shall be no needy before you, but if there are needy, and then when there will be needy, there will always be needy among us. The world, there's never going to be a moment, at least if you follow this kind of traditional classical Jewish line of belief, that we will not have people that are suffering that we need to help care for. And if you try to do it all at once, maybe you'll be somewhat successful, maybe you might be more successful, but you know that you're successful if you can help the one person who's before you now.
Right.
I also feel unduly determined to defend the Rebbe. I'm like, the Rebbe's perfect. Like, why are you criticizing the Rebbe? Like, the Rebbe's perfect. So I just want to say, like, this is a snapshot vision. And I get the sense from this story that this is his daily practice, that every day he's doing these acts of service. And the mission of this story, at least as I read it, is it's not actually about the woman, it's actually about the Litvak. The whole point of the story is to convert the Litvak to away from book learning, away from doing things the right way and towards a life of service. But it's like, I remember there was a lecture when I was at Hebrew College on money in Jewish communities, and there were communities that and rabbis that came from various different communities with different levels of money. And one of the questions was like, how do you justify raising all this money for your community? And the rabbi was like, it's not just for my community. The money that we raise in our community, that goes to inspire people to give back. The money that supports this community actually supports so many other communities, because this is a place that people gather and get inspired and go out and do service. And I think in a similar way, if this Rebbe is inspiring all of these people to do their prayer life as direct service, he's not just addressing that one woman's concerns, he's actually creating systemic change one person at a time. And that's a really different way of writing the story. He's not writing it by writing policy, he's actually getting people out on the streets. See, he's a good guy.
No doubt. No doubt.
I abstain of criticizing the rabbi.
All right, thank you. Thank you. When you think about this story, Erev Yom Kippur, what's the takeaway for you? Like, how would the Rebbe's example, since you all love and admire this Rebbe so much, what would the Rebbe inspire you to do in this new year to take up your game?
For me, it'd be, I'm more like the Litvak. I'm a very ritually driven person. You might kind of guess that from what I do. So the inspiration is for me to get out of that comfort zone and do more for others.
Yeah, I think that it's a difficult question to answer, or the opposite. It's very simple, the answer. The answer is to do more, all right? But we all get in this, I don't know if it's comfortable, it's a part of our routine. We come, we teach, we try to inspire people, we exercise when we have time, we go out with our beloved ones, we raise little kids, Anyways, but it's such a blessing. But then, we know that we need to do more. And this balance between prayer and action, we can all do better about it. And even if it's one thing, just bringing wood to somebody to make that person warmer, I think it's much better than changing a systemic change. Hopefully we can incorporate at least one little thing that is small for all of us.
For me, not seeing the Rebbe, the rabbi, as the main character, but the Litvak of this story, it reminds me of all the ways that we tear people down. Like we're looking for the flaws. We're trying to pull people down off of their pedestals, and it can't really be. And this story invites us to find the good, to know that it's there, to see it in others, and really to not always be asking the question, well, what's wrong here? But maybe ask the question, what's right?
I love that he goes and chops down a tree, because we have Eitz Chaim, that Torah is a tree of life, and there's a teaching that sometimes you have to uproot the Torah in order to live the right Torah in your life. And so I think for me, the question that it invites me to think about is, what are the ways in which dogma or religious theology gets actually in the way of me doing what's right? And how do I live more righteously and be discerning in the moment about when it's time to go pray and when it's time to be chopping wood? Wes, what about for you?
Well, I live with a perpetual tension. We're in the Gann Chapel. I begin every day in the Gann Chapel at 7 a.m. I end every day at the Gann Chapel at 7:30. And in my little zip code of 02458, 02459, all is good in the world. And if you begin every day in Gann, and if you end every day at Gann, and if the main people you deal with are either members of our beloved community or my family, then that's a good day, okay? And I'm always mindful, though, about all of the incredible brokenness that Unetaneh Tokef reminds us of. What about Morocco? What have I done? Nothing. What about Maui? Nothing. What about Libya? Nothing. What about Ukraine? Nothing. What about Appalachia? Nothing. What about the serious problems in our country? Nothing. What do? I'm in the Gan Chapel, and I'm with people at Temple Emanuel. And I'm always struggling with, is that enough? I'm always struggling with it. My life is so local, so localized, such a 02458, 02459 zip code, such a 385 Ward Street, 40 Montrose Street zip code, and the whole world is so rife with pain, and I'm here in the Gan Chapel. And I'm always wondering, is that enough? I always live with that tension. And then I read this story, and this story to me says, yeah, that's enough. If you help one woman, that's better than not helping one woman, and if you help one woman, you're making one person's life better, etc. And so I personally like the story and appreciate the story, and I also wonder, does that story let us off, does that story let me off too easily? When I think about, like, who's a counterexample to this Rebbe? Who's a different mode of Rebbe? What about the Lubavitcher Rebbe? And the Lubavitcher Rebbe does not help one woman who's in a forest cold. You know, he sets up communities where there's a Seder in Bangladesh, and there's a Seder in Bangkok, and there's a Seder wherever you go, there's some Chabad center there. Somebody who goes out into the world and actually heals the world. This person heals one woman. This rabbi does not heal the world, unless you want to say, well, if you heal one person, you heal the world. But that's just words. So I am left, as a person who's very local, I'm left reassured that very local gets you into heaven, if not higher. And I'm left, Erev Yom Kippur, with the question, am I doing enough? And is a life of service that begins and ends at the Gan Chapel inherently too limiting? Does the world need more from us? And when I read Unetaneh Tokef, I kind of think it does.
The only thing I could say to you is that you are not alone on this. Many of us, including in any kind of profession you do. Even people who travel all the time that get out of 02458 perhaps feel the same way.
Yeah.
The other thing about particularly Unetaneh Tokef is that that whole prayer is about realities that are beyond our control, that often we can't solve for, right? Like, hu bekitzo, hu velo bekitzo, like you can't solve for how long somebody gets in their world. There's no systemic change, there's no application that you can put yourself to in Gan Chapel or out of Gan Chapel that changes that reality.
Yeah, I agree with you. And Magefa, I mean, look at Magefa,
Yeah, and
Translate.
plague.
You can't change that. And so I think there's a tension
Fires.
between our sense of, even the fire in Maui, right? Like, before it happened, there was nothing we could do, and now you can be there to support. But fundamentally, there's a way in which our world is just full of tragedy and challenge that we can't touch and we can't ever
So
solve.
to just to bring us to a close, what I hear that coalescing around this group is the last line of Unetaneh Tokef: Teshuva, tefillah, tzedakah, ma'avirin et roha gezerah, repentance, prayer, and acts of justice, kindness. Those can and should be local. And if they're done locally in 02458, 02459, if they're done in the forest, if that's where you live in the forest, then that, yes, that's good enough. And in fact, that's all we can do.
Well, and this story, like so many Hasidic-ish stories, actually ends by telling us a story about the experience. So the Litvak doesn't laugh. I think that's so profound. The Litvak has learned something now. He's no longer trying to say that it's not possible to heal this world, this mode won't work. He sees a path and he becomes a disciple. And when it says the Rebbe goes to heaven, he says, if not higher. Right. And if we all say, if not higher, then the power of this story becomes exponential. And if we're all doing our part, then perhaps the world heals.
I like that interpretation. I think that the leadback ends up doing al chet shehatati lefanecha, right? Basically saying, I was misjudging this person. I was suspicious of him, of his behavior. I just wanted to find something bad about him, and he gets the opposite reaction. Right, so that's so Yom Kippur.
So Elias, do you have a song that can take all this in?
Yes. No. So we have, there is an Israeli song. It's called Unetaneh Tokef.
Oh, yeah.
It's a beautiful song. If you know it, you and I will change the world. אני ואתה נשנה את העולם, יהיה לנו רע, אין דבר זה לא נורא. אמרו את זה קודם, לפניי לא משנה. אני ואתה נשנה את העולם.
Shabbat Shalom and Gemar Chatima
Shabbat Shalom.
Chatima Tova.